unique molecular makeup, which is actually quite important because each of us reacts quite differently to various drugs and to various environments, etc. So this is really to make more effective preventative care, prevent
fight against tuberculosis. With public awareness sessions such as these, UBC brings us all into the mix. Scientists, researchers, practitioners, health. Another leader in the fight against tuberculosis is TBVets. And Andrew and I will share with you this evening just why that is. TBVets has a noble military heritage dating back to the First World War. When veterans returned from the Great War, the war to end all wars, thousands were suffering. The government was very ill-equipped to handle this insurgence of disease. There was disputes between the federal and provincial governments, and veterans suffered without care and without veterans. But that's, having worked with veterans for many, many years, this is the part I love the most. Veterans always step up, not just for one another, but for those that are most in need in their community. And this is what happened with tuberculosis. the veterans banded together and created a movement. And we're in university, we all love movements, don't we, for the cause. And that's what they did against tuberculosis, starting back in 1918. That's when the advocacy began. The Second World War, another influx of those suffering are men and women in uniform suffering from tuberculosis. Only this time the government was a little bit better equipped to handle it, but that is when TBVets formed in British Columbia. We initially introduced the key tag program. I think a lot of you are too young to know about that, but some of us are. And that was designed to give the returning veterans jobs, health care, stability, and get them dignity, because when they returned home, they were not able to find employment. So TBVets not only offered the employment opportunity by them making the key tags, and that's how our fundraising began. And that's another thing I love about working with veterans, is their community service. They have unwavering support when it comes to serving the community. And tuberculosis is one of those causes that they have been fighting for over 70 years. As all great organizations evolved, so did TBVets, in order to remain relevant to society. Our evolution from the great movement, the great tuberculosis movement, into TBVets, and now in modern day, we are the TBVets Charitable Foundation. It's all been quite remarkable. TBVets has led the charge against tuberculosis and other respiratory diseases for over 69 years. I made a mistake in the slide. It's not 68, it's 69. And next year, it's our anniversary, our 70th anniversary. That's how long we've been at this. This tenure speaks volumes about the commitment, excuse me, TBVets has and will continue to have well into the future regarding the fight against tuberculosis and supporting your work at universities. Oh, I went back one. Sorry. TBVets evolution has also brought us into the realm of the provincial strategies. I show you this slide just to show that we're part of a bigger structure, just as you are in your university research as part of a bigger structure. We all fit into the continuum of care against tuberculosis in one way or another. Partnerships are very critical, and I only mentioned a few. There's many partnerships that I'm sure you're going to encounter through your life's work. But they're critical in the non-profit world, particularly as it relates to healthcare and the health sciences. Governments, hospitals, centers, health centers, universities, nonprofits, none of us can do it alone anymore. We all have to work together, share together, and nurture partnerships to make your work valuable and part of the continuum of care. New partnerships to ensure our role in the community and the community services we provide remain relevant. In today's world, TBVets supports many different aspects in the fight against tuberculosis, but also all respiratory diseases. Our fundraising is directed towards university research, the acquisition of special equipment, especially in those areas where there's the greatest need, bursaries for professional therapists, prevention through public awareness sessions, such as we're experiencing this evening. It all relates to the continuum of care that we're part of. And most recently, we've just sponsored a respiratory therapist activity worker in the TB ward in the Vancouver General Hospital. Now, this is a first in Canada, and we're very proud to be part of that because, as you know, part of care and treatment for those isolated, you have to have some social stimulation. As Andrew and I join with you this evening to showcase World TB Day, I hope we have given you just a brief background about why TBVets is with you in this fight. We've been there for 70 years. We're going to continue to be there for more. our future is bright. As our organization continues to evolve, we are going to be striving to reach all British Columbians who are suffering from respiratory disease, from the oldest to the youngest. And we're going to help tuberculosis reach the 3 million missed cases that we're all here about today. Taking action and saving lives, that's what TBVets is all about. Thank you, and good evening.
Thank you, Cheryl. So now we're going to move on, and I'm going to do a brief introduction before moving on to our speakers. And I hope that you walk out of this room convinced that tuberculosis is actually happening, that it's not a disease of the past. I got a lot of friends, it's like, oh, you are doing research on tuberculosis, really? I thought that was already eradicated, but it is not. And also, I want you to walk out of this room convinced that actually our two speakers, at least to me, they are heroes because of the work they are doing. And I'm sure you're going to be convinced of that. What you see in here is like art from 17,000 years ago, and it's bisons. And I put in this because they actually found tuberculosis in bisons, actually DNA from TB, well, bobbies in this case, infecting bisons, 17,000 years ago. And also in mummies in Egypt, and also in pre-Columbian mummies in Peru. So I'm from Spain, and I've been always told that we Spanish, we got all the disease into America, but it's not true, at least for tuberculosis. The tuberculosis was there even before we Spanish got there. So another interesting thing is that tuberculosis has been embedded in the history and arts and in the life of people for centuries. So you see this is the famous painting from Botticelli. So the model, actually her name was Simonetta Vespucci. And if you see the snake that is around the neck, that was used to represent back in the times that person actually died from tuberculosis. Again, Edvard Munch was an impressionist artist in at the end of the 1890s. He was suffering for TB a lot, not personally, but his sister, his mother, they both died from tuberculosis. And he was actually representing that suffering that tuberculosis was causing to the people in all this painting. And that the Scream is probably the most famous painting from Edvard Munch. So all these things in the early 1900s were thinking that that's what people was dying of. You see that tuberculosis is pneumonia, respiratory diseases, and tuberculosis was at the very, very top, okay? And we think, yeah, it's from the past. So this is what you would do before the era of antibiotic. If you were lucky enough, and you had TB, you go to a sanatorium, it's nice and sunny. If you're not so lucky, you are in, like these guys in Michigan, and it's all cold. So that's the only thing you could do. But antibiotics really changed the landscape. This is ampicillin. It's not effective against tuberculosis, but it was the first drug that was used in mass scale, right? So it was a game changer in the infectious diseases area. And same thing happened with tuberculosis when we got the streptomycin. Everyone thought that, okay, we have a drug, we can cure TB. TB is gone, it's a thing in the past. And also because if you see the trend of mortality at the end of the century, tuberculosis is out of the picture. It's not there anymore. So people drop interest on TB, they drop any research, any money, and all of a sudden, TB is back. Also because of the HIV co-infection, and TB is becoming a big problem, right? So today, 1/3 of the global population, that's 2 billion people, is actually, more than 2 billion people, is actually infected with tuberculosis. That doesn't mean that they have the disease, it's latent there. They don't have any clinical symptoms, but they are carrying the bacteria, and at any time they can become infective. 8.6 million people, they are actually developing the disease. And you're gonna see some pictures today of what that actually means. And 1.3 million people, that's the data from WHO, from the World Health Organization in 2012, they actually die from tuberculosis. That's a massive number of people, right? So I'm just gonna do a brief explaining you what it means to have TB and what it means to be treated with tuberculosis. You know, you have a cough, a flu, whatever, you take something is 1 week, you take your antibiotic and then boom, that's it. You get cured, most of the cases, if you're a nice and healthy person, right? But for tuberculosis, being infected with TB means that you need to be taking drugs for almost 6 months, and they are nasty drugs, actually. This is out of all, we have hundreds of antibiotics, right? But only 4 of them, they work to treat TB. And it's these 4 drugs that are called the first-line drugs. Just to tell you that the last one that was discovered was rifampicin and was in the 60s. So it's more than 40 years ago that no new drug has been developed for tuberculosis until now. That one of our speakers is going to talk about that. And the problem is that now we are having strains that are resistant to these drugs. They are called MDR, multi-drug resistant, or XDR, extensively drug resistant. So what you see the second line is that when the first line drugs, they don't work, you start administering the second line. But the problem with those ones is that they are even more toxic and less effective. So instead of being 6 months to cure TB, it's 2 years that you need to be on medications. So that is really, really tough. And today, we are very lucky to have our 2 speakers here. Our first speaker is Jan Hajek. I hope I have pronounced well your name. Good. We are very lucky because he's going to bring the perspective of what it's like to fight against TB right on the field. He's now a clinical assistant professor here at UBC, but he's been working for 1 year in Uzbekistan and also in South Sudan treating TB patients. So he's going to tell us a first-line experience of what it means. And our second speaker, Dr. Anil Koul,
There's no way we're going to eradicate tuberculosis in Canada without eradicating it elsewhere. It's a clear example of how helping others helps us. Currently, there's about, as Santi said, 8.6 million cases of tuberculosis in the world, and still in Canada, there are about 1,500 cases every year in Canada. About 10% of those people die. One new case of tuberculosis about every day here in British Columbia. And it's a nice, I like that example of how, it's so clear. If we help other people, it helps us lower the rates of tuberculosis here in Canada. And this also highlights the point, despite being a preventable, treatable disease, we had the streptomycin and the initial medications available for more than 50 years. Still, it continues to cause a huge burden of disease. So why MDRTB? So as Santi pointed out, so the drug-sensitive TB, we actually, as clinicians, we call this the easy-to-treat TB. So drug-sensitive TB, it's relatively easy, 6 months, but it's cheap, about $20 to treat. Medications are relatively well tolerated, they're effective. It's been a very good treatment regimen to really help cure patients with tuberculosis. MDRTB, hard to treat. The medications are toxic that we currently have available. They're not very effective. They cost thousands of dollars, and there's limited access to them, largely because of their cost. Now, this makes MDRTB a global threat. In 2012, there are about 500,000 cases of this MDRTB, this TB that's now resistant to those effective, easy, first-line medications. And about 170,000 people died of MDR-TB. Now that we lose access or the effect of these drug-sensitive TB medications, it threatens to reverse the gains we currently made using these medications to fight against tuberculosis. And there's also the emergence of these strains of XDR-TB, these strains that are virtually untreatable. Now, they've been reported in more than 90 countries, in countries like Africa, India, China, Russia. We've even had cases in Canada. And these MDR-TB, the global treatment rates, cure rates are about 50%. With XDR-TB on average, it's about 30% with our currently available medications. One, because they're so intolerable for patients to finish the course, and two, because the medications that we have currently available are not very effective. This was a problem not just in the other countries, it was a problem even in New York City. In New York City, largely because of budget cuts and lack of investment into TB control programs in the 80s, the rates started increasing. And there was a bit of a TB epidemic, an MDR-TB epidemic. About 20% of patients with TB in New York City had MDR-TB. So what did New York City do? Oops. Yeah. So they invested a lot of money. They spent $1 billion, about all told, and they invested heavily into healthcare infrastructure, into healthcare systems, and provided treatment with the currently available medications for MDR-TB. And they had a huge impact. Rates went down dramatically. But for the rest of the world, this wasn't an option. Here's a statement by the WHO in 1997 in one of their publications that MDR-TB is too expensive to treat in poor countries. It detracts attention and resources from treating drug-susceptible tuberculosis. So although it was something that was accessible to wealthy countries, it was deemed not accessible, not affordable to poorer countries. If a case of drug-sensitive TB costs about $20, why would you spend so much money on treatment for someone who has drug-resistant TB? Another statement here, in developing countries, people with MDR-TB usually die. Effective treatment is often impossible in poor countries. So these ominous statements. And this is a photo of a child in Cambodia who's suffering from MDR-TB meningitis. And there's a web presentation by this photographer, James Nachtwey, and it's a very powerful thing that you could look up online to watch. So in response to this global epidemic of MDR-TB being addressed in rich countries but not in poor countries, so here enter MSF in the humanitarian response. So what did MSF do? So first they asked questions. They said, why are these medications so expensive? These medications are off patent for more than 30 years. Why are we paying so much money? Why are they not affordable? Two, they said, why is it a zero-sum calculation? Why does spending money on MDR-TB mean not spending money on drug-sensitive TB? Why does that have to be neglected? Why can't we just do what New York City did, focus on both? Then they asked, well, what will happen? What if we don't treat these people who have this lethal airborne infectious disease? Will they just stay home and die, or will they go out trying to seek whatever care they can? Maybe they'll get inadequate treatment. Maybe they'll spread it to other people. And then they asked also, is there a moral imperative? Like, don't we have to treat these people if they have a treatable infectious disease? So next what happened was MSF joined with other partners, including NGOs like Partners in Health, WHO, CDC, and they got together and they formed a partnership to ensure access to affordable medications for MDR-TB. They, as a group, they were able to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies and get a better big price, like buy medications en bloc. So they bought the first 2,000 medications, the whole treatment courses, and then they got a good fair price, and then they sold those at cost to the countries that were affected by MDR-TB to allow them to start treating patients with MDR-TB. And so what happened as a result of these initiatives? Well, rates of MDR-TB, the cost of MDR-TB medications plummeted. You know, from $35,000 for a treatment course in 1997, it went down to $1,500 in 2000. Successful pilot projects were launched. Now that they had access to medications, they were able to treat people with MDR-TB. And in 2009, Dr. Margaret Chan, the Director General of the WHO, announced with the other members of the nations that make up the World Health Organization and the World Health Assembly, they made a commitment for universal access to diagnosis and treatment of MDR-TB and XDR-TB by 2015, that everybody who has those 450,000 people who get MDR-TB every year, so in 2009 they said we should get everyone on treatment by 2015. But how did we do? We did terrible. You know, there in 2009 we had very few patients, and so here this. Yeah, there. In 2000, we had very few patients. Here, 2012, about 80,000, and our projected rise, based on our estimates, is very poor. What we're aiming for, though, is here to reach this 450,000 patients with MDR-TB. At the time had diverted water that was providing water from a river to feed this lake, and they diverted it to irrigate cotton. And as a result, the lake dried up, and the people who lived there depended on the lake. They were fishermen, they lost their livelihoods, and there was a lot of poverty, as well as environmental devastation. There was even climate change in the area. In the area we worked, it was quite bleak, actually. So there's some Soviet buildings and a big road, a camel walking there. And this is some of the houses of a city and a village, and this is hundreds of kilometers away from this RLC, and you can see that there's this white dust on the ground, and that's actually salt. It's salt that was from that lake bed. It became salty. There were some pesticides, things that dried up there, and then it was carried up in the atmosphere with the wind, and it was transmitted hundreds of kilometers away throughout the region, which made it much more difficult for things like farming. it's not all gloomy and bad. This was the ancient Persian Empire and the Silk Road, and here's a beautiful madrasa, an Islamic school in a city called Samarkand, which conjures up a lot of historical memories of Persian Empire and Silk Road. So one interesting thing about Uzbekistan too was this huge cotton industry. So it's still going on today. They're still irrigating cotton, and Uzbekistan it's currently a dictatorship, and the government requires that government employees do pick cotton. And so this includes university professors, teachers, students, doctors, TB nurses. They all have to go out to pick cotton during cotton picking season. And this makes it difficult for human resources. So this is my assistant and I. We went to a TB clinic and we saw a sign on the door, everyone to cotton. And during those cotton picking seasons, there are serious health resource, human resource shortages of nurses and doctors providing TB treatment. Most of our time was spent training, so teaching doctors how to provide MDR-TB treatment safely and effectively. I'm just going to talk now about two patients that I thought have good examples of how MDR-TB is a devastating disease and a treatable disease. So this one was first Isonim. So Isonim was the first MDR-TB patient we treated in this region where I started in Hajek. And she was 14 years old. She got sick. She couldn't go to school anymore. She was too weak, coughing, losing weight, and was found to have tuberculosis. Now, she lost a brother and her sister, both died of tuberculosis, and her father had been sick from tuberculosis for 10 years. Despite getting all these first-line medications over and over again, he died and had to watch two of his children die of a similar disease, and now his third was sick. But she was diagnosed. She was found to have MDR-TB, and at the time, we started her on the MDR-TB treatment regimen that we have, the WHO standard regimen. And so this is a hard regimen to tolerate. This one's not the easy to treat one. This is a hard one. So 7 medications, that's 14 pills, and 1 injection every day. And these injections, she didn't like these injections. They're very difficult injections to take, especially if someone is cachectic, if someone's very thin, low muscle mass. To have 1 injection every day, and she put up with it for 8 months. So she had an injection every day for 8 months, took all these pills, vomiting, depression, psychiatric side effects. Some patients actually attempted and some managed to commit suicide as a side effect of some of these medications. But she survived, she put up with all the medications. She's now a healthy, normal girl. She's going to school and she's doing well. Her father, however, was not as lucky. So her father had very advanced disease. He was sick for so long that this chest x-ray, it should be black like that, and all the white there is disease on his x-ray. And despite getting the same treatment, putting up with the same treatment, he was not successful in getting a cure, and he unfortunately died in hospital. So then this last patient, we have a video of her. So this is Rakatai, and Rakatai had MDR-TB, and one of the MSF teams, they filmed her telling her story. And so I'm going to play that video.
argue that I couldn't even swallow pills. How could I be on treatment? But I couldn't even tell her that. The doctor, Jan, came and did a checkup, and I started on treatment. And now, as you can see, I feel very well. I have less difficult breathing. I can hardly believe that I was so very sick. I am really grateful to my daughter. I will probably be grateful to her for the rest of my life. I want to thank Dr. Jan because he came and he saw the severe state that I was in. But he didn't say, no, she won't make it. She's hopeless and we will not treat her. He just trusted in me and started me on treatment.
I like that video because she says my name. So. Gonna say So that's it. I think I squeezed in a lot in those. I think it was just 20 minutes, and so I think this is just again a plug to go access their website to look up www.msf.ca. They have a TB manifesto where they're urging people to sign, and they'll be presenting this to world leaders. And what they're urging is to keep true to these commitments, to ensure that there is universal access to drug-resistant diagnosis and treatment, to get better drug-resistant TB treatment regimens for medication, about $60 a day for one tablet, and you have to take that maybe twice a day for months. So in rich countries, MDRTB is extremely expensive, and people have to be isolated. There's lots of, the whole costs together are extremely high. For poorer countries, they are currently cheaper available medications, but still some of these medications are outside, are really expensive. For example, well, hepatitis C is a different infectious disease, but right now we have new blockbuster treatments. So hepatitis C used to be very difficult to treat. Now it's treatable, but $60,000 to treat someone who has hepatitis C. And that's just not available for other people. And MDRTB, hopefully new drugs like that become available will be priced so people who have MDRTB in countries where they really need it will be able to afford it. Yeah, I don't know. You know, what you should do is first, don't go to that place where you were infected in the first place. One of the areas where it's the biggest, highest risk of being reinfected is South African gold miners. So these are people that might be HIV positive. They go into mines where they get exposed to dust. They're in close confines, and there they get TB over and over again. You can tell them, well, you know, don't go to work. And it's very difficult for them. You can try to do things wear a mask if you're around someone who has tuberculosis, to wear a mask if you're mining, to wear masks like that. One of the best ways, I'd say, on a big population level is HIV. So about 13% of people who have got TB are HIV co-infected. And if we treat them for HIV and get rid of their immunocompromise, then they will no longer die of tuberculosis, or their risk of dying of tuberculosis would be so much less. We've actually found that the rates of tuberculosis were dropping even before we had medications. So medications help, they're very important, but things like improving someone's immune system, someone's quality of life, not staggering too many people all together in one building, those things help prevent someone from getting TB again. Yeah. That's a good question. So it's high. So healthcare workers are disproportionately affected by tuberculosis, and particularly in poor countries. So one, here we're very careful. We wear a mask. Patients are isolated. The risk in Canada is low. I'd say it's quite low, higher than someone who doesn't go to hospital all the time, but it's relatively low. In poor countries, the risk is high, and there has also been neglect for that. There has not been an adequate response to providing respirators or masks and paying attention to infection control, providing adequate infrastructure to hospitals to prevent TB being spread to patients in hospital and to healthcare workers in hospitals. It takes a special person to do that. Yeah, it does. So you mean with the skills to know how to do that, or? To take that, to go, yeah. You know, so I agree. It takes a special person to do that, to take that risk, especially so people who, so for me, I don't take the same risk. I'm, you know, it's very hard, you know, solidarity, I believe in solidarity a lot, but I have access to things like respirators. So if I go to a hospital where people might not use respirators, I do use one. And so I do protect myself when I go into hospitals where they have MDRTB, especially XDR-TB, and I wear a mask to try to mitigate that risk of getting MDR and XDR-TB. And the best way to do it is to see patients outside. So lots of the times when we did home visits and things like that, we would try to visit patients and speak with them outside. And outside and with the big airspace, it's much more difficult to spread tuberculosis. I'm going to repeat the question. So the question was if, yeah, no, I heard, I understand it. I'm going to repeat it just so, yeah. So I think the question was that if drug-resistant TB arose because of people inappropriately taking treatment for drug-sensitive TB. And yeah, that's true in part, for sure. We know if you give someone one medication, like that first discovery, streptomycin in the 1940s. We knew in 1940, if you take just streptomycin alone, in a few months, you'll get resistance to streptomycin. You'll just select for that mutant that was resistant. So for sure, if you take just one drug alone, you'll get resistant to that drug. If you take another drug alone, you'll get resistant to that drug, and hence you get MDRTB. But also just the natural evolution of bacteria, it just happens. No matter, even if you try treating as best as you can for almost every infectious disease we have, maybe except for group A strep, it's still sensitive to penicillin. Almost everyone, it's just a natural history that it's going to evolve and it's going to become resistant. So we have to stay a step ahead of the game. We have to keep looking for new and better drugs that can treat MDRTB. But a huge thing, so in Uzbekistan, the former Soviet Union, highest rates of MDRTB in the world. And a huge part of it was because the Soviet Union collapsed, health systems collapsed, and people couldn't adhere to these drug-sensitive treatment regimens. And the rates of MDRTB skyrocketed as a result of that.
Okay, now we are going to move on our next speaker that is actually going to tell us, Jan is telling us that we need new drugs and we need better and more efficient drugs. And here is the man that is going to tell us how to do that.
Thanks, LSI, for this nice opportunity. I think it's fantastic being here in Vancouver. I had one sunny day, so that's more than I can expect. So today, the aim is basically to give you a kind of layman's summary of TB drug discovery and development, and from a pharmaceutical company point of view. So I work for Janssen Pharmaceuticals, which is part of Johnson & Johnson, and the whole team for TB drug discovery is based in Belgium, though there are people across the whole world. So what I will try to do is showcase the TB and its challenges. Jan and Santi did a fantastic job in terms of introducing the TB as such. What is MDR-TB? What is XDR-TB? What is drug susceptibility? What are the public health issues for the TB as such? So this slide basically shows you what TB does if you treat it. Like if you treat active infections, because TB is an aerosolized airborne infection, and if you have an active infection, and if you take the regular 4-drug medication, you almost have 95% chance that you will get cured. So that's for what we call classical drug susceptible TB. But the challenge is here. When you have the drug resistant TB or MDR or XDR TB, then you have almost 40% of the mortality in these cases. So that's for the MDR-TB, and there are cases for XDR-TB where you have almost 70% of the mortality, and lots of these people die within a month of their infection or detection of their XDR status. So the challenge is basically the drug resistance which has emerged in TB over the last several years. I think drug-resistant tuberculosis is a big challenge from the public health perspective in all the high-burden countries where TB is there. And this was very nicely illustrated by this Time Cover magazine issue of February 2013, where they showed why drug-resistant TB threatens us all. So there's a very nice article depicting what is the real status of MDR-TB or XDR-TB or totally drug-resistant TB cases which have been found in certain countries across the world. So in this article, there's a famous physician, Dr. Zarir Udwadia in Mumbai, where he says that the medication which he has available for some of the MDR or XDR-TB patients, they don't work at all. He says that there's lots of medication which patients which are not responsive to MDR or XDR-TB medication. So the treatment options for these patients are very, very limited. And that's a big challenge for a physician treating a patient, knowing that the chances of these medications being effective for these particular subset of patients is very limited, that's a scary, scary proposition. So that's what he says, please help, I don't know what to do. So how we can help as a society? We can help as a society by fantastic work which Jan is doing, but by the work which TBVets is doing in terms of getting the awareness, or by groundbreaking research. But at the same time, from a pharmaceutical industry point of view, we need new TB drugs. That's very clear that in order to stop the TB epidemic, in order to stop the emergence of the resistance, we need better drugs. So that's what we have been trying to do at Janssen. Before we do that, what is the complexity of the treatment of MDR or XDR in the current age? It was very nicely illustrated by previous presenters that TB, it takes about 2 years to treat MDR or for that matter, XDR, TB, and it's complex, it's expensive, and it's toxic. And third of all the MDR TB patients die. That's the reality, that's the current epidemiological data what we have. A patient who has MDR or XDR TB needs 20 pills a day. Jan showed in his slides 16, so there's data which shows that indeed you need around between 16 to 20 pills a day. And this is the handful of pill which a patient has to have for his treatment. Apart from pills, the challenge is the injectables, that you need once a day injection for 8 months to get rid of your MDR or XDR TB. So this is a big challenge in terms of treatment regimen itself. It brings in so much stress, the psychotic effects, the body mass not being right for the injectables, or all the challenges in getting treated are much more difficult than having the disease itself. So there is complexity in the treatment, and that needs to be simplified. So what do we know? Whenever we start in a pharmaceutical industry, a project, we always say, what are the current needs? What do we need to change? I think for objectives for development of new MDR or XDR TB therapy is that we need more effective treatment. We need to shorten the treatment from 2 years to, let's say, even if we do shorten it by 1 year treatment, that will be a big milestone. We need to have improved safety and tolerability of these drugs. We need to have drugs which are more palatable, which a patient can take much more easily. We need to shorten treatment duration, as I said, and we need simplified regimen. We need to, as far as possible, to take out the injectables from the treatment for these patients. So there are several different things which need to be done. It cannot be done by one single pill a day, but I think over a period of next few decades, we will be hopefully able to remove and simplify the treatment regimen for MDR or XDR TB. So before I go in what we have done as Janssen or as part of Johnson & Johnson pharmaceutical drug discovery and development company, I want to give you a snapshot of what a drug discovery challenges are, as well as the developmental challenges are. So this is a slide which shows you basically the different stages of pharmaceutical drug discovery and development. So we start a project, what we call pre-discovery. At a stage, you identify what really is the disease, what you are trying to do. And then you do the drug discovery, early discovery part, where you screen the compounds, you screen the libraries, you identify the compounds, you identify the targets, and things like that. Then you move into the preclinical phase, where you test the compounds in different animal models, in different preclinical models, in different translational models, and try to see whether they are effective in this particular phase. Then once you have done, once you are confident about the compounds or about the leads, you move and do what we call clinical trials. So the clinical trials are divided in 3 phases. You have phase 1, you have phase 2, and you have phase 3. The phase 1 is the number of patients are a little bit small, between 20 to 100, based on how complex the program is. And the aim of the phase 1 is basically to see the safety. It's healthy volunteers, and you want to see that the drug which you are intending to use in a patient population is safe in the healthy patients. The phase 2 is geared towards to see what we call early proof of concept. That is the drug working in the patient population, though in a very small number, but in a sizable number so that you can statistically see that the drug is safe. The phase 3 is a large trial where you increase the number of patients to see how the drug affects on a large number of patients across different countries, across different races, across different ethnicities. So once you have collected all this data, it goes into a review file with regulatory agencies like FDA in US or within European Union, it's EMEA. So different regulatory, each country has its own regulatory agency, and you have to present the file to that regulatory agency in order for the drug to get approved in that country. So the challenges in the pharma R&D currently are basically the average cost of discovery and development of a new drug. These are the average cost estimates. This is between $800 million to $1 billion. So it's preposterous to see how much it takes in terms of getting one new medication to the patients. So Jan was talking about HCV medications costing $60,000, but the amount of investment which goes into getting a new drug is really, really high. And the time it takes from the discovery to the time it gets in the patients is between 10 to 15 years, based on the project and how successful and how easy you can do it. So that's, apart from the money and the time, it's the risk associated with that. Only one molecule out of so many different leads will finally make it. So it's a very high risk business. And as you can see that the pharmaceutical R&D budgets are very high. They run in billions of dollars in order to see the investment coming out of all the research they are trying to do. So indeed, a very complex challenge, a really risky business. So this is a slide which tells you how the evolution of pharmaceutical R&D has happened, or how our understanding of pharma or our science or our knowledge across drug discovery has happened. So on y-axis, you have performance or value. On x-axis, you have time or investment. And this shows you the curve starting in 1930s, when you have streptomycin kind of drugs discovered. So then you went what we call chemotherapeutic agents. From this particular age, we went to the rational drug design. We went to the biopharmaceuticals, which are the antibodies. Then we went, 1990s was the age of industrialization, where we had high throughput screen. Everybody was talking about so-called high throughput screen. We will cure everything, just tell us the disease, and we will screen millions of compounds, and the disease will be eradicated in a very short time. So that was the age of industrialization, the hype around it, the HTS campaigns. The last decade was basically the age of biomarkers. You want to identify what was initially talked about personalized medicine. You want to identify how your genome responds to different drug types. And now we are talking about more translational clinical research. We are talking about high content biology and different. So each and every decade has its own phases in terms of technological evolution. But the challenge with the TB is that we are still in a very early age. It takes lots. We have the lack of basic science understanding of TB bacterium, how the host reacts to the bacterium, the definition of a clinical endpoints, how do you design and how do you conduct all these clinical trials, the length of those trials are really, really challenging questions, and we don't have all the answers. That's why it's very hard to find new TB drugs, because of our lack of basic understanding and the tools available for the TB drug discovery and development. But if you look at the global challenges, you have TB, HIV, and malaria. It was shown that TB deaths per year. We have 1.8 million deaths for AIDS. For TB, we have 1.4 million, and for malaria, it's around 660,000. So this is the annual death rate, as was shown by previous speakers. So in spite of TB and AIDS having almost similar, let's say approximately similar death rates, if you look at what has happened in HIV in the last 25 years, it's amazing. For HIV, you have almost 30 new drugs which were developed in the last 25 years. Why? It's because HIV is a commercial opportunity, and it's also it was easy to develop new drugs, but it is a very commercial opportunity. And if you look at the TB, it's only one drug in the last 40 years. So there is a big discrepancy in terms of the efforts which go in both from the public advocacy, from the R&D perspective, from different perspectives between HIV and TB. And this is illustrated in this particular cartoon here. So indeed, TB is a neglected disease. HIV, the advocacy is really, really strong. And the money which goes into HIV R&D is much bigger because of the commercial nature of the disease. As I said, that TB is not a lifestyle disease. It's not like cardiovascular disease. It's not something like diabetes and things like that. It's really a disease of marginalized people. Like you have drug-susceptible M. tuberculosis here, drug-resistant M. tuberculosis. You have mycobacterial ulcerans, which is deadly, all those really, really harsh infections. And you have the historical Mycobacterium leprosy. So it was already alluded that we don't have a new TB drug for the last 40 years now. So this is the pipeline: isoniazid, pyrazinamide, ethanol, and rifampicin, showing when was each drug discovered. And these drugs did make a huge impact on the public health, for, considering the mortality rates they decreased for TB. But after 1963, everything stopped. The whole world thought that TB is eradicated, we are done, the business is done, let's move somewhere else. And we stopped all the R&D research, we stopped all the drug development across TB. There were always something or other happening, but the major efforts were really gone. And that's why we stopped thinking about TB as a disease. So that's why we call the mind the gap. So then comes 2012. And 2012, New Year's Eve, we had a new drug approved for TB, which is called bedaquiline or Certuro. So it was approved by FDA, and it's the first TB drug to be approved, and it's used for MDRTB patients. So this was a big news. This was a big news because, as I said, that 40 years nothing. Now you have a new drug, and it's approved for MDRTB patients. So there was a big media splash across the whole world. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to show you a video, basically a news item, which summarizes the developments about bedaquiline post-approval from FDA. It was somewhere in CNN, IBN. So maybe Santi will help me with this, projecting this video.
It's a breakthrough. A new line of treatment for multi-drug resistant tuberculosis has been approved by the US Food and Drug Administration for the first time in 40 years. Tested on 440 patients in several countries in phase 2 clinical trials, the drug Certuro could prove to be a game changer.
We've had other antibiotics which have doubled up for TB drugs, but this is a new class of drug. It acts by a specific and new mechanism working via ATP synthesis. So it is the first new TB molecule, and really it's going to be reserved for MDRTB as well, which is what makes it even more exciting in our country with its huge MDR burden. Since it's a new molecule, there will be no resistance to it up front at all. But it's our job as physicians to ensure that it's very responsibly used.
India has been grappling with both multi-drug resistant TB and XXDR-TB, which does not respond to any known treatment so far. Currently, this new drug is available for use only in the United States, but doctors in Mumbai have written to the manufacturers to make it available for this one Indian patient who has not responded to any standard treatment so far on compassionate grounds. Right now, the treatment for multi-drug resistant TB is a 2-year course of up to 20 pills a day and around 8 months of daily injections. But doctors say, just as with these, the new drug Sirturu also has side effects.
Well, there are concerns about the what we say cardiotoxicity of the new drug. However, I have to tell you that with the current regimen, with the cocktail of drugs that we use for the patients, we have so many side effects that sometimes we feel embarrassed to give these drugs to the patients. There is no safe drug 100%. This new drug, with bedaquiline, seems to have a good safety profile.
In Mumbai, Nikita.
So I hope that the video did give you a perspective about how the media felt or how the general public felt about this particular new drug. So this is the bottle of the new drug. It's called Sirturu. You can see it's when you see at the end of the end of 10 years, which we have spent on this particular drug, and the drug from the lab getting into a bottle. It's one of the best experiences you can ever have. I never thought that I will ever be able to see the drug in the bottle. So this was a big thing. So what were basically the highlights of bedaquiline approval? So as I said, that it's part of appropriate combination for MDR-TB in adult patients. It's only adult patients, not in the pediatric setting. It's based on accelerated approval on 2 controlled phase 2 studies. Its recommended dosage is for first 2 weeks, we use a loading dose of 400 milligrams once daily, followed by 200 milligrams 3 times a week for 22 weeks. So the total duration is around 24 weeks. As said, that it's recommended for administration using DOTS therapy, and the phase 3 part of this particular drug, the phase 3 clinical trials, is still ongoing or is planned. So what were our challenges for the bedaquiline? I love this slide because it gives you a perspective of that the process has not been a straight line. It has had its own challenges, as with every other project, what we have seen. So few thought that bedaquiline will never make it. So first thing, what we were told that you guys used the wrong bacteria to screen. You use a non-pathogenic Mycobacterium smegmatis, while TB is very pathogenic. So this is something wrong. So you started the project from a wrong foot. Then there were people who said that ATP synthase is not a validated target for Mycobacterium. It's not the right target. You should be doing something else. Then you have human mitochondria, which has also the ATP synthase as an enzyme. So then how do you take into account in terms of the toxicity concerns for human mitochondrial ATP synthase? So they said that physicochemical properties, this little bit scientific term, that the properties of the drug are not optimal. So we are not used to seeing properties of the drug, something what bedaquiline has. So this was one of the concerns. I think there was a lot of concerns about that we don't know how to develop a new TB drug for MDR-TB. Not many people have done it in the last 40 years. So how exactly are we going to do it? Do we think we are the right kind of clinical setup in terms of looking at the clinical endpoints and the clinical path for MDR-TB? So commercial viability as a pharmaceutical company, how do you see TB as a disease from a commercial perspective? As I said, that it's not HIV, it's not hepatitis C, it's not something else, it's TB. It's one of the very poor countries in the world which have TB, and as such the commercial viability and attractiveness of this disease. The public-private partnership model was not very well defined at that time. I think what really helped us, I really want to stress this point, is that there were few people in the company which really believed that this drug can make a big difference to the millions of the people across the world. And those people did carry the weight of bringing the drug forward at each step wherever we met the failures. And it's also based on the credo, what we have, and we believe in it as Janssen, as a company, that it's our social responsibility towards the patients first, rather than anything else. So the patients come first, and then everything else falls into line. So that's what drove the whole project, and that's what drove the whole investment of Johnson & Johnson into this particular drug. That it's our responsibility towards patients. So how was this drug discovered? Did we design it? I think we did a very unconventional phenotypic assay in order to find the drug. So this was the drug, what originally called TMC-207. It's now called Certuro and Bedilquilin. It made a big impact when it was published on the cover of Science in year 2005 by Koen Andries et al. So what does Bedilquilin do? It's a fantastic drug because it's a new class of antibiotic which blocks the ATP, or which blocks the energy production in bacteria. It stops the bacteria from producing energy. The moment you stop the bacteria from producing energy, the bacteria simply cannot absorb the shock, as with any of the living systems. So it blocks the energy production in bacteria. So this is the enzyme which produces the energy in bacteria. It's the same enzyme which produces the energy in the humans. So what Bedilquilin does is that it stops this particular motor. This enzyme acts like a motor, and this is the rotation of this particular motor. And if you stop this motor, and this is where the Bedilquilin binds, and if you stop this motor from rotating, it stops the cell, or it stops the bacteria from producing energy. And the moment the energy is stopped, the bacteria stop growing, and they are eventually killed. So what we did, we tested Bedilquilin across different strains of TB bacteria, and in vitro as well as in mice, and we really confirmed its fantastic activity across different test systems. So this was what we call the Bedilquilin development plan, the clinical development plan. So as you can see that the clinical development started in 2004. So we are already 2014. So we already have spent 10 years in terms of doing the clinical research, leave aside the discovery and the preclinical research. So this is the phase 1. So we did almost 11 phase 1 trials with this particular compound. So this is the phase 2 trials. The phase 1 is the safety trial. The phase 2 is in the patients, where we did these different trials in drug-susceptible TB, in MDRTB patients, these 3 different trials in the MDRTB patients, and the phase 3, as I said, is something ongoing. So this was the first TB patient to receive Bedilquilin. It was 6 July 2005 in Cape Town, somewhere in South Africa. So this was the first guy who ever got Bedilquilin, and this was a moment for celebration for us. And we said that, can we take a picture of yours? So I will, in terms of the time, I will just simply show you what is the efficacy of Bedilquilin in patients with MDR-TB. It's just one single slide showing that indeed, when you put this slide shows you on y-axis you have positive patients, on x-axis you have time where their sputum becomes better, or let's say they become better. So what you see is this is the placebo. So you have only 10% of the patients who take the background regimen, or who take 5 drugs as a background regimen, are treated. While when you add Bedilquilin to these patients, you have almost 50% of the patients getting treated of TB in let's say 2 months. So this was really fantastic result, and it clearly showed that adding Bedilquilin to the TB drug regimen really has a remarkable improvement in curing these patients for TB. And as such, because of the importance of this particular finding, it came as in the New England Journal of Medicine, and this was the principal investigator, Dr. Andreas Diakon, who did this particular trial, and most of the patients were from South Africa. So then we did another trial, which we call C209, where we had patients from across the whole world. So you can see that we had lots of patients from Eastern Europe. This time we had patients from Peru. We have patients once again from South Africa, and also a few patients from Asia. So it was across the whole world where we did study the drug in terms of efficacy on MDR, as well as XDR or pre-XDR patients. So these are the clinical study from this particular study. 11 countries were used, and this is the response rate in terms of the cure. So you can see that almost 90% of people are cured when they have MDR-TB, and 80%, 77% in response rate for pre-XDR, and 50% for the XDR. So indeed, the drug is very effective for treatment of MDR or other resistant forms of the TB. So this was basically this is a story about an email we got from Nepal in year 2012, where we had this particular girl. Her name is Nemdol. She is 22 years old at that time. She must have she must be 24 now. So she was a Tibetan refugee living in Nepal, basically. So what she was diagnosed was extremely drug-resistant TB, and she weighed only 26 kilograms when she was diagnosed with this particular disease. She hit a rock bottom because of getting treated with these toxic MDR-TB treatment regimens. So she was really 24 kilograms. And by the end of 2011, we had compassionate use, and we put her on bedaquiline. And after 2 years, she did really recover, and her weight improved, and she really survived a near-death experience. So she acknowledged in terms of that, I want to thank all those people who have worked hard on this particular drug, and also all the support we got. So getting emails like this, it really regenerates your soul. It really motivates you in terms of seeing that direct impact of the research in the society as well as the patients. So this is another story, as Jan said, that how doctors are exposed to the risk of getting TB. And this is a real life example. So Dr. Daleen from Delft is a pediatrician in South Africa. As a pediatrician, she is exposed to the pediatric TB, and she was diagnosed of TB via one of her patients. And the TB was basically MDR-TB, so that's the complication. She spent Christmas in isolation, was hospitalized, and was told that she needs everyday IV administration of amikacin. She knew the complications of getting the MDR and XDR TB. So her accurate description of the side effects was very confrontational. So she really felt very bad about it. But what was the challenge? The challenge of using amikacin as a treatment was that she developed progressive hearing loss. So she was losing her hearing over a period of time. So this is a graph showing her hearing loss. So this is the baseline of her hearing, and this is after 8 weeks of treatment with MDR-TB medication. So you can see that her hearing loss is getting worse and worse. By 12 weeks, she's almost 50% of her left as well as right ear loses its hearing capacity. So indeed, very, very dramatic for a very well-educated physician from South Africa. She got on bedaquiline when she heard the news that there is an experimental drug, and she says that this particular drug saved my life. So this was really moving. She restored her hearing loss, and eventually she got cured of her MDR-TB. Indeed, very nice stories. So this is basically what we show the regulatory status in different countries. As I said, the drug is approved in the US, it's approved in the Russia, it's recently approved in the European Union, and the approval in China, South Africa, and rest of the countries is an ongoing process. So what we are trying to do as a global TB access framework, we are trying to use prioritized registration. We are using differential pricing because we want to make sure that the drug reaches the marginalized communities and the patients across the whole world. That's what we really want to do. We are here not for any commercial scale, but we want to make an impact on these TB patients. And there are different things which we are trying to do in terms of getting the global TB access framework going. So Janssen or Johnson & Johnson has recently initiated what we call global public health. initiative. So it's a kind of a research body within J&J, which is looking at neglected diseases as such, and to see what is the global health impact across different patients which are marginalized, which are outside the society, and where there is not much funding available. So there's a public website available for this. So in summary, what did VedaClean do? VedaClean strengthens the TB armamentarium. It's the first new TB drug to be developed in 40 years. It improves the treatment success rate, and it also protects the companion drugs from the spread of the TB resistance. I haven't shown you the data, but there's lots of data available around it. And what we hoped that this drug does in coming years, that it does change the treatment paradigm for treatment of MDR and XDR-TB. There's lots of work to be done, but we hope that this will be done in the next couple of years. We hope that we can contribute to the realization of global ambition to eradicate TB by 2015. That's what we hope. And we also hope that we will be able to showcase the world how to develop a new TB drug using public-private partnerships as a model. And I think this is the final slide. This shows what are the lessons learned. The lessons learned, I like to see it, that every miracle compound looks hopeless at times. So the same thing with this particular project. We had some ups and downs, and we really thought that maybe this is the last thing which we will do in the next few weeks. If you make a real discovery, initially very few people believe you. So there was lots of public skepticism that will this drug ever make it? Both from the biology perspective, from the commercial perspective, from other perspective, we were really not sure how exactly it will work out. But I think the key, as my colleagues always keep on telling me, that try to enjoy whatever you do. Self-motivation, at least in TB, is the most important element of carrying the field forward. Yeah, TB as a research, or any other neglected disease, not only TB, malaria for that matter, HIV for that matter, or any other neglected disease, does need some kind of budgetary support and R&D setup. You cannot leave it to the commercial pressure. We as a society, we as individuals have the social responsibility for these particular diseases. A financial incentive is finally linked to the impact on human health. It's not all about money we are talking about here. It's the impact we can make to the lives of patients. The video which Jan showed with this young girl, it's really moving, because this is finally the outcome of the whole story, that how much you can change somebody else's life. Yeah, this is, even after 100 years of discovery of TB bacterium by Robert Koch, we still have millions of people dying of TB, which is basically a shame. This is the final slide in terms of the website, what we have, www.certuro.com. There's lots of information available there. So you can see lots of labeling information and the usage information out there. And this is, finally, I want to thank this particular guy, Dr. Paul Janssen. He was founder of Janssen Pharmaceuticals, and he discovered almost more than 70 drugs. And he always used to say, very simple man, very honest, very earnest man. And he always used to say that as a pharmaceutical company, we should always think that patients are always waiting. So you always have to give your best in order to reach the patients who are having different diseases, not only TB or any other disease. So this is the famous punchline which we use: the patients are always waiting. There are so many acknowledgements for this project. It was not only me alone. There are several hundreds of people within J&J, Johnson & Johnson, or investigators, or doctors, or even TB patients who got involved in all this research. So I want to thank everybody who has been involved in this project. I'm just being as a representative of somebody who participated in this particular fantastic story. I think this was the last slide. Yeah. Yeah, I knew that that question was coming, so I think I prepared a slide in the backup somewhere. Maybe, yeah. So, yeah. The question is that what is the rest of the pharmaceutical industry doing in terms of eradicating TB? There are lots of companies, pharma companies, trying their genuine efforts in eradicating TB. So, and this is the pipeline showing different projects which are currently ongoing at different pharma companies, at different global public health initiatives which are being run. And you can see that there are a few drugs which are already in the phase 2, or some of them are in the phase 3. So the field is really moving forward, and there's a lot of hope. That's why I said that there's a lot of hope that in the near future we will be able to change the treatment paradigm for TB, along with what Better Clean can contribute to.
Fascinated by the corporate culture.
Yeah, I can't repeat the question. So, so I think the answer is it's with most of the projects that there are strong proponents, and there are guys who believe less into the science as well as into the opportunities. So it did happen that we did have our tough days. And but I think the key has been that a few of the individuals within the company, including our CSO, Chief Scientific Officer, Dr. Paul Stoffels, he worked in Africa for 10 years, and he has seen the disease in Africa in terms of the burden and in terms of the impact it has on the society. And his value in letting it happen and it getting through all the processes was really amazing. So there needs to be a strong leadership, and that commitment, I have seen it coming through. It's not that one person can do it. It needs a management who, from up above, who can believe in the project and the health impact. Yeah, I think the question is that how does Janssen see it as a drug being manufactured and distributed across the rest of the world? To be honest, the challenge, maybe Jan knows it much better than me, the challenge with TB drugs is the supply chain. The supply chain is so essential, because it's not only the drug. You make a drug as a pharmaceutical company, and then to reach it to the right patient population, that's a critical thing. And for TB, it's much more critical, because you want to have a controlled access. You don't want to distribute drug across all the pharmacies in the world. You want to give it so that it can be properly used. So there has to be some kind of control mechanism in terms of getting the drug across. So, but to be honest, I don't really know how it will be distributed across the rest of the world. But there are lots of people, both from WHO, from Janssen, and from other companies looking about how exactly and how well we should do it. I have no clear answer to right now. Yeah, the question is that considering the investment, we as a profitable organization make in TB, what is the economic outcome of this particular project. I think the economic outcome, as I said, that we are not really looking at as a business opportunity. We are more looking at the impact which this drug can make and the goodwill. I think the goodwill which you can generate with this particular or these kind of projects is immense across the countries which are really emerging, which are really high burdened, and where the markets are there. So this is an opportunity for us to showcase that that there are certain things which can go beyond economics. And if you generate the right will, if you generate the right connectivity with the local population, you can always see the benefit in the long term. It's not the short-term impact which is important. Oh, yeah. The controversy, as you probably have seen it from the video, surrounds around what we call the mortality imbalance. So there is data which shows that in one particular trial we had less mortality in the placebo arm, means the control arm, and we had more mortality in the treatment arm. So there has been a controversy about why do we have less mortality in the placebo arm. So that's one of the key concerns which we have, and which others, all the regulators, everybody else looked at, and that was a controversy which lots of people are talking about, and also the cardiovascular safety profile of this particular drug. So it does have does slightly increase the QT prolongation, but as was said, that there's no life-threatening event till date which we have seen to stop a drug like bedaquiline, when we know what is the safety profile of all the background regimen which are so toxic, neurotoxic, and things like that. So I think that's what the ongoing clinical research will tell us, that how do we see the safety and efficacy of this particular drug on a larger population setup. No, we haven't done anything in terms of looking at the personalized approach for treatment of TB. I think nobody has done it. These are very expensive studies to do, and we don't know what to look at. We don't have any idea about which person may be at more risk of bedaquiline as compared to the another. I think that there's no data available. Yeah, the question is that from the microbiology point of view are there lab strains which are resistant to the drug? And that's true. There is what we call genotypic resistance for some of the mycobacterial species. So Mycobacterium smegmatis is still susceptible in terms of the MICs, but there are certain mycobacteria which have a point mutation in the ATP synthase, the target of this particular drug. And with that point mutation, the drug is completely ineffective for those mycobacteria. But those mycobacteria are not really, they are environmental mycobacteria, they are not pathogenic.
Okay, well, I'd really like to thank Anil and Jan for their presentations. I think the effort that goes into developing a new drug and the effort that goes into actually going out in the field and making sure that the right patients get the drug is enormous, and it's inspiring to see the efforts that you both made. I just want to point out a couple of other things. We have 10 TB researchers in this building, in the LSI, that are the best in Canada, or the best amongst the best in the world, and certainly the best in Canada. And so we're really poised to make some real contributions to this area, and we're looking forward to the interfacing with Anil and Jan to try and make that happen. So if you want to learn more about, I guess one of the things that we do as part of this is, of course, all of these efforts that we go to do cost money, and so if you want opportunities or want to know about opportunities to support this kind of research, in one of the handouts in front of you, there's some names at the bottom of people that you can contact, or you can contact me directly if you're interested in knowing a little bit more. The next public session that we have is going to be on May the 27th on immunology, or your immune system and you. And you can visit the LSI website for further information. And there's feedback forms in front of you, so if you could fill those out, we'd be very happy to, or very grateful for that. Anything we can do to make these sessions of a particular interest to you. So again, thank you very much for your support and for coming out tonight. Greatly appreciated.
We have food outside the room.